Hi there everybody and welcome back to the channel. Now if you're getting started in the world of photography and videography, you have probably by now come across the term lens mount while out shopping for a new camera or a new lens. So what this video is going to go over is what is a lens mount, what does it actually mean, why does it matter to me as a new aspiring photographer or filmmaker, what do I as a beginner really need to know. So don't worry, we got you back. Let's break it down. So let's start with the basics. What is a lens mount? Simply put, it is the connection point between your camera body and its lens. It's where the two physical parts physically interact and communicate with each other, like so. Think of it exactly like a lock and key mechanism, because fundamentally that's what it is. Our camera body here is the lock and the lens is the key that opens that lock. And if they are not compatible with each other, if you have the wrong key that doesn't go with a particular lock, then it won't work. But if everything goes okay and you have a compatible lock with the correct key, then everything lines up properly and it all works as it should. Now, every camera brand that you'll come across typically has its own lens mounting system. For example, Canon, one of the best known and longest operating camera brands, has its EF and RF mounts. Nikon's modern cameras have its F and Z mount. Sony uses E and A mounts for their cameras, and so on. There are lots of names and lots of different brands, but that doesn't matter. The point is that each of these mounts has a specific design. So to give one such example, this is the Panasonic Lumix GH3. It's a very long in the tooth camera by today's standards, but Panasonic Lumix cameras typically use the Micro Four Thirds or M4.3 lens mounting system, which is what you can see here with this 25mm 1.7 prime. And what you'll see is a particular arrangement of mounting hardware and electronics that line up with what we will find on the camera's lens mount. These two parts are compatible, and I can line up the red dot that we can see here on the red dot of the camera body, and they will screw together. But here's the important thing: you can't mix and match lenses between different systems without making sure they are compatible first. For example, here, this is a Sigma lens designed for a Canon EF mount, but I just told you that this Lumix camera is designed for the Micro Four Thirds lens mount, so you can see they're about physically the same size. No matter how hard I try, even if I line up the red dot like we did before, these two parts are never going to fit together. And this goes for all kinds of cameras. Canon lenses will not fit on Sony cameras, Nikon lenses will not fit on Canon cameras or Lumix cameras, and so on. Now, functionally what this means as a beginner is that if you, for example, get a Canon camera as your first ever camera when you're starting off and you start to buy some lenses, well, you might change and decide that actually a Sony camera is better for what you want to use it for. But now you've bought a load of lenses that won't work with that Sony camera, so you have to spend a load more money buying a load more lenses and so on. But thankfully, there is a way around this. And the solution to this problem comes in the form of adapters. So what I have in my hand now is an example of an adapter. Now this particular example takes a very old style of lens mount called M42 or M42 and adapts it to the more modern standard M4.3 or Micro Four Thirds. So if I have a vintage lens like this one that is completely analog, doesn't use electronics, but I want to use it on my more modern cameras, then the solution to this is we take our adapter, screw it on securely, and then you can see that it gives me the specific mounting hardware that I would need to adapt it successfully to my modern camera, and then I can turn it on and you can see that it's working exactly as a lens should. An adapter essentially acts as a translator between a different kind of lens and your camera's body that wouldn't be necessary if you had a so-called native mount. You wouldn't need any translator in the middle. The camera and the lens speak the same language. And that element of language I think is important, because if you look at my modern Lumix lens here, you can see that it's got electronic contact points. Now, why would you need those? If your camera, for example, has autofocus or stabilization or any of these other technologies, then the camera needs some way of electronically talking to the lens, and the way that it does that is by these contacts. I've got another Canon lens here, and once again, it has these electronic contact points, which means that it's capable of communicating with the camera, and we can see that it supports autofocus as well. So if I press my autofocus button on the camera, that is how the camera is telling the lens to focus on the target. Now, if your adapter has no electronic communication, as many cheaper ones don't, then none of those technologies will work. On more expensive adapters, they support this kind of electronic pass-through, so be sure when you're buying an adapter to check if it has them. So again, here on this vintage lens, old Micro Four Thirds mount, no electronics to be found. It's entirely manual, so even if I attach it to an adapter with some electronics in it, it's got no way of talking with the camera because that technology wasn't available yet. So why does lens mount actually matter for me as a consumer? The main thing is it determines your options when it comes to buying lenses. So if you invest in the Canon lens mounts, for example, just because they've been around forever, they have a huge range of glassware to buy. Because Canon were making their own lenses, companies like Sigma, who make aftermarket lenses for these types of cameras, they would cater to the mass market, so they would produce lenses in Canon mounts. But that's going to be less true for other systems which had less support. Lumix, for example, and the Micro Four Thirds mount, there are simply fewer, I should say, lenses available, similar with brands like Pentax that are much less prevalent in the modern market. So it's worth doing a bit of reading and seeing what kinds of lenses are on offer for your use case in the mount system you want to invest in. And it also impacts your ability to upgrade in the future, because if you stick with one brand and mount system, you can acquire a very large collection of lenses to meet different use cases if you want to do photography, videography, cinematography, and so on. Whereas if you buy multiple different types of camera, that will mean usually buying multiple sets of lenses for all of those systems, and that can become very expensive very quickly. So what do you need to take away from this video? When you are buying a camera, check which lens mount it has and therefore which lenses are compatible with it. If you're not sure, look at the product description or ask the person selling it to you. If you're a beginner, I would recommend sticking with one system and building up a small collection of lenses for that system. If you then want to branch out, adapters can be a great workaround, but they are not perfect. You may sacrifice some features such as autofocus and stabilization when using them. As an absolute beginner, sticking to one system is the best bet, at least until you're comfortable, and then you can make a decision and then you can start thinking about whether to buy into adapters for using glass for other systems, or selling your collection and starting again with a new mount system. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.